Okay, in this video, let's take a look at how to use StatCrunch to do the inferences for the two groups. First, let's take a look at how to do the inference for pair data. And we will use the example that we have seen in the lecture note. Does the FOMO affect the behavior of the patients? That example. So as I've mentioned, for the pair data, because we are only focusing on the differences of the means, so actually many of the other textbooks are considering it as a one sample t-test. So we are going to go t-stat, one sample with summary, because we don't have the raw data, we have the summary data. And here, for all those summaries for the sample, you are going to enter the summaries for the differences of the two groups. So the mean of the differences is 2.43. The standard deviation for the differences is 1.46. Sample size is 15. Let's see, we do the hypothesis test. So that's greater than 0. Go compute. You see this test statistic and degrees of freedom, and the p-value is exactly what we have found by hand. Similarly, the same thing could be done here. T-stat, one sample with summary. You are going to do this, enter the same information, and you could find out the confidence interval as well. Here, in that example, we are using a 99% confidence interval. You just enter the value and do compute. And that will be the same as what we have done by hand. So the lower limit 1.31, upper limit 3.55. So this is how you do it for the pair data. For the two independent groups, we are using the vitamin potency example as we have seen in the lecture note. So you go t-stat, two sample with summary. So now you are entering the information here. So 10.3, for this is for the first sample, and here is for the second sample. Here is the option for the pooled variances. We didn't talk about the pooled t-test. Basically, you could have a better test if you are absolutely certain, not absolutely, you are almost certain that your variances for the two group are the same. We didn't talk about that pooled test because this t-test that we have talked about is more practical. That pool test is not very robust with this assumption of equal variances. So we didn't talk about that. So you just leave it there because the default was off. So just leave it there. Don't click on it. And the hypothesis test we have been doing is like this. So click compute. The test statistic 4.27 and the p-value are very similar to what we have found. And the degrees of freedom here is a little bit different. Remember the degrees of freedom, we are using the N1 plus N2 minus 2. I've mentioned it is approximate degrees of freedom, and this StatCrunch may use the exact formula to calculate the degrees of freedom, and it's not an integer numbers anymore. So the test statistic and the p-value are both slightly different, but again It's quite similar and it doesn't change your conclusion of your hypothesis. So that's for the hypothesis test. For the confidence interval for two independent groups, it's going to be very similar as well. You just enter the same information that we have just entered. It says 15. I think this is 10 here. Again, we will leave this unchecked. We are doing the confidence interval for 95% confidence interval. Again, click compute. Your degrees of freedom is a number that is not an integer. Again, what we are using is approximation, but you see your upper and lower bound are quite similar to what we found. So that's how you could do it using StatCrunch. I think this should be no problem to you as well, since it's quite straightforward. This handout 11 should be pretty straightforward to you. Okay, let's end the meeting.